Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday presented by Farm Virtual Connections. If this is your first time joining us, Virtual Connections is an initiative by Folk Alliance Region Midwest, created in a response to a desire to find ways to stay connected during the pandemic, but it's grown to encompass programs like this and peer sessions, performance lane, and what we hope will be lots of great conversations over the coming months. We will be getting started in just a few minutes, but first, a few technical housekeeping things you need to know. We will keep you all muted for the duration of the presentation and then open up to questions. Since we can't see all of you physically waving your hand, when it's time, we'll be asking you to use the raise hand function in the reactions tab in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you're on a computer, you may need to wiggle your mouse to see the toolbar. On the iPad, you should see the tools in the upper right corner of your screen. Once you have the participate window open, you'll find a little blue hand in the lower left corner. At least that's what we think, unless Zoom has changed for you. If you prefer, you can use the chat feature, which is similarly enabled by clicking on the icon in the bottom of your Zoom window. If you're on an iPhone or iPad, you want to look for the three dots that say more and click that and you'll find the chat there. Sorry, but we've disabled the ability to chat among attendees for this session. We will be recording this, so it's available for replay on our website in a day or two, and also will be available on Facebook as we're going to Facebook Live. So welcome. If you're new to Farm, we are a regional chapter of Folk Alliance International. Our purposes are to promote traditional, contemporary, and multicultural folk music and related performing arts in our region. We hold an annual regional conference. The registration is now open and early bird registration is going on at this time. We represent the interests of our members to Folk Alliance International and carry out other projects that are a benefit to FAI members in the Midwest, such as these programs. If you're curious, our region is Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Manitoba, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, Nunavut, North Dakota, Ohio, Saskatchewan, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. But we recognize that we have people from all over the place here on our call today, and we hope to treat this topic in such a way that if we can answer questions for you outside of this region, we will. We have a couple special guests with us today to talk about state touring rosters. We have Nick Carswell. He's a musician, organizer, and cultural producer. He's been performing professionally for 25 years in his native Ireland and across the U.S. Midwest, where he's lived since 2011. His main creative output is a songwriter and frontman for the alt-rock five-piece Carswell Hope, which is excellent. And he's a creative industry specialist for the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission. We're going to start with you, Nick, and then we will be talking to Christine Bial in just a little while. But Nick, if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking a little bit about state touring rosters from your perspective as a representative of the Kansas Creative Arts Industries, and we can go from there.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Great to see everyone joining us virtually. And yeah, of many programs that started during the pandemic, and we still see value in them. I applaud you guys for keeping that going, and for all of you for showing up. So great way to continue to stay connected. So I am an Irishman. Been accidentally living in Lawrence, Kansas is usually how I put it, for about 12-13 years. And in recent years, I've joined KCAIC, so that's the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission. I'm a contracted field representative, and I've been working on music ecosystems, and now the touring roster is kind of falling within that purview. And before I actually began that position, my band, Carswell Hope, was on the touring roster. We joined several years ago. So I mean, yeah, very generally, I have... I can't speak for every state, but I know every state is encouraged. I think maybe Christine probably might have a better idea that pretty much every state has a touring artist roster. It's not always musicians. We certainly in the Kansas touring artist roster, excuse me, we have a variety of disciplines. We have some theater and dance, quite a lot of artists and programs, or artists who have programs that are geared towards kids. So children's entertainment, storytelling is a big, it's actually some of the most kind of longest standing and successful types of artists that are on the touring roster in Kansas. I'm not sure if that is unique to Kansas, but certainly the mechanism that the roster kind of makes use of um, is well suited to basically organizations who program for kids, because obviously that has to happen quite a lot. Libraries, any kind of presenters that build within their programming entertainment or educational outreach for kids. So anyway, that's just kind of some top level background. We the context for Kansas as well, we actually have since I kind of have been involved in the program and have been on as a contractor. Our last round, we actually doubled the amount of artists on our touring roster. So we have an annual call for artists to submit to join the roster. That includes all of the usual materials that you would need, submitting everything from a resume, an artist statement, to good headshots and all of those promotional materials. But in Kansas, and I believe as kind of a standard for the touring roster, there's frequently a requirement to have an educational or an outreach piece. Certainly, I'll speak to what I know in Kansas. We offer and require artists to have that piece available. So any engagement and any artist that's on the roster would need to have a performance, of course, or their art form in whatever shape or form or discipline they determine that to be for themselves. But additionally, we want to make sure that those that artists on the roster and who receive grant funding, which I'll come back to here in a second, but they have that educational and outreach piece. So that can range from artist talks, songwriting workshops, to anything related to your specific art form. It could be instrument classes or teaching, or it could be something more involved around a specific body of work, or something very kind of fundamental to the core of your art making, your art practice. But the point is that there's an outreach piece or an educational piece that is in addition to your performance. So that's kind of one of the first things that we discover when artists want to join the roster, is that frequently that may not be very well defined. For many artists it is. It's kind of part of their portfolio. But that is one thing that we work with artists who are interested in joining the roster to either develop that aspect of what they do, or sometimes it's just being able to describe it and adequately kind of market it. But that is part of the goal of the roster, of us keeping a roster, and then the granting that goes together with that. So once artists are on the roster, they're promoted from our website, which we are a unit of the Department of Commerce at Kansas. The rosters can be maintained, based on each individual state's structure. But for Kansas, we're under the Department of Commerce. It's the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission. And all of the artists that are listed on our webpage, Alexa, do you want to pull up our webpage while I'm talking at this point? Because it might be useful.
Yep, just one moment.
So once artists are successful in joining the roster, then they're listed on our webpage and they're eligible for these grants. And that's really what it's geared towards, is getting more music, more arts into communities around Kansas. So yeah, there's the touring artist roster. And if you scroll down, you'll see we get straight to the roster and the artists that are on there. We do have these divided. You'll see there classical music, jazz. There's some discussion around how relevant this kind of genre categorization is, or as people redefine themselves over periods or have a specific body of work that they're trying to get out into the community. This may or may not be relevant at any given point, but it's where we are now. We're actively looking at various elements of the roster and how we use it. But modern music is another category that's in there. Does that mean anything to anyone? Modern music? At some point, as we describe genres, I think it's a question worth considering. But of course, then, as you get down to the visual arts, we also maintain a mural roster as well for folks who would want to create public art or those kind of public art experiences. And we get into theater, and then as you go down the genres, there's some question and discussion around that, but it is really all geared towards the grants, the visiting artist grants. I think if you go down a little bit more, I can talk about our onboarding, but I did want to get to this idea. So, in Kansas, the touring roster is one of the few places that we actually deal directly with artists. Most of the KCSE granting is towards nonprofits or units of government or federally recognized tribes. The touring roster is a connection that we have to individual artists. Now, we don't grant directly to artists. This is a distinction. It's pretty important. It's more that once you're on the roster, then you are eligible for other organizations to apply to bring you to their community. So the organization would apply for the visiting artist grant, with the touring being interested in one of our roster artists and bringing them to their community. So there's a one-to-one match. We also have some additional incentives for rural communities.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. That's all right.
I can't even realize how to. Second,
You're all good.
How do I go back?
You can stop share. We don't
Okay.
need to see this. That's all right. But the concept is that once you're on the artist roster, then you are eligible to be brought to these communities from a nonprofit. So an organization would apply for the grant, and the idea being within that there's a performance, there's an outreach or an educational component. And that's how KCSE fits in, kind of a convener between the presenter and the artist. There's multiple facets to it around professional development in both artists, like being interested to join the roster, being having as a goal to tour within their own state or to tour regionally. It's not for everyone, but if you're at that stage, that's where the roster can be a useful tool to you. And then as we kind of evolve our thinking on it, we want to make sure that the role that we play as the state is a connective role, and it's about facilitating these connections between presenters and artists. And with this new cohort that like I said, we've doubled the amount of artists on there just since last year. We're kind of exploring what that can be in terms of a peer network within artists, how artists can share best practices amongst themselves. Everything from keeping your materials up to date, developing programs that would be well suited to the types of organizations that use the roster or use the visiting artist grant. And really, again, I came from this from the musician's perspective, so I very much have the artist in my mind, but it's a connective piece that enables artists. It's another string to your bow, another reason that you could get a booking, and the better, that we're all connected and kind of have a grasp of those materials and how big of a part that is to your individual practice, or what the ecosystem looks like in terms of supporting that mechanism. I really do think of it as a mechanism to support artists getting, especially to rural communities, places that, without the roster, they may not know how to book a band or a storyteller. So that's the connective piece that KCAIC can play. And then, after that, at some point, it's down to the individual artist and their practice, and getting connected to the presenters. And really, we're kind of exploring what that development looks like. I'm a firm believer in peer networks from the artist perspective, for sure. And then, if you think of showcases like the recent Folk Alliance or other opportunities that we could get artists in front of presenters, make sure that they're aware of this mechanism, and encourage just more arts, music, and arts and culture throughout Kansas, and then more employment opportunities for artists. So that's kind of my fast and furious top-down approach. I mean, I certainly would love to have more of a discussion, hear questions. I can speak to what happens in Kansas. I can speak to our goals about how we see touring artist rosters as a development tool, both from the state's perspective and from individual artists. But I think that's probably enough to get us going here, Alexa.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that we will want to broaden the conversation. KCAIC, I can say as a artist on the touring roster, has a great program. And one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this topic is that I feel like everywhere I go, people don't realize that these state touring rosters exist. So just the fact that we're talking about them and hopefully helping people connect to their state touring roster is a big deal. But then there's like this other level. Let's bring Christine into the conversation and we can talk about that. Christine Bial is, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly, please say it when you come on, is the Director of Arts and Humanities Grant Programs for Mid-America Arts Alliance. She brings her work nearly 25 years of state arts agency and nonprofit arts experience as a grant program manager and theatrical production stage manager while being the mother of 2 daughters. So Christine, would you share a little bit about Mid-America Arts Alliance, maybe including the area that you are covering and what your relative organizations might be in the other Midwest areas?
Great. Thanks so much. It's good to be here and I'm glad to see everybody. So Mid-America Arts Alliance, we are located in Kansas City, Missouri. Our main offices are there. We are a nonprofit regional arts organization, one of 6 in the country. And we primarily serve Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas. So 6 states in the lower Midwest are technically called our region as a regional arts organization. That's what we're talking about when we talk region. That being said, we do have a couple of different opportunities that are national in scope, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. So for the purposes of this conversation, it's important for you to know that Mid-America has a grant program that works in complement or in alongside what Nick has been describing that KCAIC offers. And it is called the Regional Touring Program Grant. It is where the grant program that Nick has talked about is focused on Kansas artists touring and being presented in Kansas. The Regional Touring Program Grant that Mid-America Arts Alliance has to offer is one that takes artists outside of their state and across the region and is available for organizations to apply for. So we think of it as interstate trafficking of artists, if you will, through our 6-state region. So Nick or Alexa, both being in Kansas, could book a presenter or a venue in Texas, and that presenter could apply to Mid-America Arts Alliance through the Regional Touring Program Grant and have up to 50% of their touring contract fees. If it's in the contract, it's eligible to be covered. They could apply to the Regional Touring Program Grant, and we would help offset those expenses. So that's the key difference, I think, between what Nick has been talking about and what we have to offer. We refer to our 6 states touring rosters. We don't create our own roster. They've done all the work for us. KCAIC, the Nebraska Arts Council, the Missouri Arts Council, the Texas Commission on the Arts, all 6 of our states, they have arts councils, and they have done the work of putting together rosters of artists that are interested in touring and getting out and about. They do vary, much like what Nick mentioned. They are musicians, but then they are other kinds of artists. And this grant, the Regional Touring Program Grant, is available to any type of artist that wants to tour our region. So that's important information, I think, to know. Similar to what Nick was also describing, the grant requires 2 public engagements, one being the performance and the other being some sort of outreach or educational opportunity. And it needs to be hosted by that venue that is applying for the grant. So you've done all the work of getting listed on a roster. The organization does the work of applying for the grant and making sure that all of that gets in order and is taken care of. Let's see, I'm trying to think if there were other details to make mention of. The application for Mid-America is open on a rolling basis each fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts in July. And so it's open and available for venues and presenters to apply to us for this grant until the money runs out, which just recently did for this current fiscal year. So come July 1, we'll have more money available, and we hope that you get yourselves booked and tell the venues to look to us for financial support. If you go to Mid-America's website, I'm going to put it in the chat real quick to everybody. If you go to this website, you'll be able to scroll down on the regional touring program page, and you'll see there is a drop down or an accordion that specifically says artist grant considerations. And on that particular drop-down accordion, artist grant considerations, you'll find links to not only, well, you'll find all the information you need to know about this grant that you can share to the presenters or the venues, but there's also a link to where you can request a list of organizations who have taken advantage of this grant program, so they're aware of how this is structured. And we can share that list with you if you request it. And that way you could do some target marketing, so to speak. There's also on that same drop-down accordion, so to speak, artist grant considerations. The last bullet point is a link to a postcard or flyer that we have created. It's a PDF format. You can cut and paste, clip it down to whatever size you'd like, that you can then include in your marketing materials, or perhaps have a link to it on your website, that kind of thing, that will allow you to share information about this grant program so they know where to go look for it, to get support for you to come to their venue, to their community, to do the work that you want to do.
Hey, Christine, I'm sorry, this is Annie hiding out back here.
Sure.
I shared your website, and I wonder if you could point to the screen, because I'm not seeing exactly what you're seeing. So I wonder if it would be helpful for us to explore that together to make sure I'm clicking in the right spot.
I think
Sure.
Annie, I think I can share.
Oh, great. Okay.
And I'll just talk through where you go. Yeah, great. So if you are on our regional touring program page, which you are at the moment, and you can see well, it was there. Are you still sharing screen?
Yeah, I thought Alexa was going to share my screen. There we go.
Yay. So scroll on, there we go. Applications are now closed because we've spent all the money for this current fiscal year. But if you scroll down, continue slowly, here we go, slow down, artist grant considerations, click on that. That's more information about what you can do to promote this opportunity. So each state in our region has got a roster. So we're pointing that out to folks in that first bullet point. And so if you're interested in joining your state roster, even if you're not from the Kansas area, if you're in other parts of our region, reach out to your state arts agency to find out what their process is. They always, some have annual calls for artists to join the roster, and others it's every other year. It just kind of depends. It varies from state to state. And there are, like Nick had said, there's also different kinds of rosters. There's touring artists, but then there's teaching artist rosters too in some of the states. So just keeping that in mind as well. And there in the second bullet point, we do have that link to a form that you need to fill out if you'd like to get a copy of a spreadsheet that has the name of the venue and the contact information for the person who runs that venue. And this is not all comprehensive. It's not every possible presenting venue across our region for sure, but it is a list of organizations that have taken advantage of this grant opportunity. So they're familiar with it, and they do book touring artists. That sometimes is just important information to know. And then that last bullet is the bullet point takes you to the postcard or PDF that we've created that you might want to either just simply link to or include it in your marketing materials if you go the old school way of mailing things out, or however that might work for you. But this allows for you to promote the program and draw attention to it so that folks know where to go to apply. Because like I said, it's not about you applying, it's about the organizations or the venues, the presenters that are bringing you to their community. It's for them to apply.
Christine, can you talk about if people are looking in different regions, can you kind of talk about this, what Mid-America Arts Alliance is and what your equivalencies are in the other places?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Mid-America Arts Alliance, maybe I should share my screen because I could also show, could navigate to a map that shows the other regional arts organizations, or just spend some time on our website and float around, see what you can find. But Mid-America Arts Alliance is one of 6 regional arts organizations. Every corner of the United States has got representation through a regional arts organization. And at this moment in time, every state and territory in the United States has got representation of an arts agency that allows for both state and federal funding to funnel through to promote the arts and do art activities in their states. The regional arts organizations do focus on activities across state lines within their region, and then we also collaborate together from time to time on projects and opportunities that are nationwide. But at Mid-America, we offer not only grant opportunities, this one and a couple of other ones, so do definitely go to our website and take a look at it. So we've got the Regional Touring Program Grant, we've got Artistic Innovations, which is a grant that's available to individual artists who are creating new work. That opportunity is also on our website. We also have a grant program called Creative Forces, which is a national initiative. It's about doing arts projects that engage military-connected communities, including veterans, active military, families, caregivers, all of those folks, engaging them in the arts. More information, again, on the website. But then we also at Mid-America have an artist services division, which Nick could speak to because he's interacted with artist services quite a bit. We also have an organizational services division that works with the nonprofit arts organizations across the region, trying to create networks and cohorts amongst them. And then we also have touring exhibitions. So we cover quite a wide variety of activities. And most of that, though, is focused on providing opportunities for people to experience art in our region. That we want to elevate the fact that this is not just flyover territory, as so often is thought of for the Mid-America region. We have a lot of really incredible work going on here, and that's what we're trying to elevate. We do have a couple of national programs. Like I said, Creative Forces is one. The touring exhibitions programs that we offer also are national. But for the most part, our efforts are focused on our 6-state region and covers a lot of territory. So if you've got interests in any of those areas, or if you know people who do, point them our way. I'd be more than happy to make introductions and connections. There we go. Thank you so much for that. So that's the USRAO, the United States Regional Arts Organizations map. Our region, Mid-America's region, is that bright red in the lower Midwest. But then we have West Staff out on the western side. They cover Alaska and down into Hawaii. We've got Arts Midwest that takes care of the upper Midwest. NEFA, New England Foundation for the Arts. There's Mid-Atlantic Arts. NEFA's located in Boston. Mid-Atlantic's located in Baltimore. South Arts covers that purple region. They are located in Atlanta. I failed to mention Arts Midwest is located in Minneapolis. But they have programs that are specific to their regions. And then, like I said, each of them also have national programs. NEFA, for instance, has a national dance touring program. They also have a national theater program. So there are opportunities here, depending on the kind of work that you do and the kinds of organizations that you work with. There are opportunities at each one of these organizations across the country to support the work that you do. There are opportunities. And that's the whole purpose of us being here. We've got the National Endowment for the Arts who provides some funding to us. We have each of our state arts agency partners providing some funding that we're matching back to them. And then collectively, we are all 501c3 arts organizations. So we do quite a bit of fundraising on our own to raise money to then support programs and make the arts happen all across the region and all across the country.
Thank you very much. There's been a couple of comments that I wanted to highlight in the chat. One of them is from Carrie, and Carrie says most but not all. Sorry, I was going to move my bird downstairs and I didn't do it. He wants to talk to you. Most but not all states limit membership on artist rosters to state residents. South Dakota is one which does not. So that is interesting and an important distinction to make. Bill had messaged me and asked about specific arts councils. I do have a list for all of the farm areas, state councils. If you are having a hard time finding your state touring roster, please let me know and I can send that over to you. Let's see. Yeah, we pasted. Thanks, Annie. Thanks for those.
I appreciate Gary's question, actually, Alexa, because I know, for instance, Nebraska has a few Kansas artists on their roster because they live right on the border. They're really, they're a stone's throw away just because of where they live. And so they've made exceptions. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true across all the states, but for instance, that is one that I've seen a few Kansas artists on the Nebraska roster.
Speaking of interstate cooperation, here's a question from Sylvia. Can an Indiana nonprofit venue apply for a Kansas touring performer?
It's a bit outside of Mid-America, is that right? We're crossing.
That is,
Wales.
yeah. Unfortunately, the regional touring program grant is specific to our region. So only organizations in our region can apply for that grant. So unfortunately, the Indiana organization is not eligible, nor could the funding that we provide through the regional touring program grant be used by an organization to bring in an artist from Indiana, for instance. It has to be an organization in our region who is bringing in an artist from within our region.
Nick, is the Kansas State rolling touring grant, is that different from the Mid-America Arts Alliance touring grant?
Well, yeah. So, like Christine said at the beginnings, the KCAIC grants are for Kansas organizations, and the Kansas artists. So that's kind of the function of that. So if you were to a state within the Mid-America Arts Alliance could bring a Kansas artist there, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of. I guess we were already moving up a level towards the RAO level. I mean, a lot of what Kansas is kind of primarily concerned around is bringing Kansas artists to other parts of Kansas. So, I mean, I'm wondering if some of these questions are already heading towards how you could put an entire regional large tour together, which I think is a very fair thought and a good question actually to ask. I mean, in some ways, we kind of have to deal with the parameters we work within. And again, bringing arts and culture to Kansas is the primary mission of KCAIC. If we can do that with Kansas artists, that's fantastic. And that's why we have the roster. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't mean to be putting words in anyone's mouth, but there's a logic to thinking how you could take this concept and expand it and support a whole tour, a national tour in theory. I think understanding the distinction between the individual states, how they approach both maintaining their roster and supporting the presenters engaging artists in our own state, and then the step up is where Mid-America Arts Alliance comes in. I don't know that there is a further step up beyond then. That's that Indiana question, but that would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be. That would be fantastic. Yeah. Certainly something to think about if the money could go that far.
I think maybe, to also bring it back down though, like understanding your own state and your own arts organization, your arts council. It's an arts commission in Kansas. I think it sounds like a lot of them in Mid-America region are arts councils and state arts councils. It's just kind of the history in Kansas. We just have a different name for it. with creative arts industries. Lots of words, you know, you can barely find the word art in the name of our organization, which speaks to the culture a little bit and some of the history. But the point is that at each state, understanding and getting connected with your own arts agency is really the first step to any of this. And I would say, you know, even to bring that back, if you're not on one of your on your state touring roster, you know, the question both how and why you would join that, and then what you would need. So we view that as an opportunity for professional development and connection just in developing the roster itself. So I'm kind of spanning the full scope of this concept, but you know, it has to start somewhere, and that's actually what we're doing at KCIC, is we're trying to understand how we can maximize on that, knowing that we have a peer, you know, we have a network of artists who can share and learn from each other and yeah, support each other. And that's kind of where we're starting as well.
Yeah, I think ideally, you know, the outcome from today's little webinar is that people have at least a better awareness of where to start looking and how to start even getting involved in their state arts organization, whether it's a touring roster or, you know, Nick, you as an artist are now looking at, you know, the ecosystems in Kansas arts. So like, I think involvement by artists in arts organizations is necessarily going to make everything turn out better for us all. So I have a question
yeah.
from...
Can I just make one
Sure.
point real quick, just in this, because this is a reminder, you know, certainly in Kansas, and I think this is probably true for most of them and for the regional, it's nonprofits. You know, we're not talking about for-profit organizations. I think that's a crucial distinction. There are plenty of nonprofit presenters, of course, but, you know, your house concerts, other venues that we just know that regionally touring artists build their tours around may not be nonprofit. So I would just point that out and say this, you know, being on the artist roster is not going to solve it's not going to get you all your gigs. It's not going to build you a whole tour, but it could make the difference, because it would enable one major presenter who has the capacity to apply for this funding to, you know, you could build a tour around one or two opportunities and use the roster like that. So I just want to make sure that it's not the answer to everything, but in this mix, we all know it takes a portfolio of options to build a career and a tour frequently. So I just want to make that point. I know you have a question.
Yeah, that is a good point. That is a good point. Carrie also asks, what is the turnaround time for grant applications from a venue? How far in advance must the gig be booked and the grant be applied for? Christine, do you want to?
Sure. So for Mid-America's purposes, the venue or the presenter needs to apply no less than 6 weeks in advance, I think is the timeline that we have. But we do make exceptions to that. So if there is something that's a last minute planning opportunity, we want to support as much as we possibly can. So it's a matter of reaching out to see if staff has the capacity to process it right away. So we have turned things around in as little as 2 weeks. But technically we prefer 6 weeks out so that we can fit in the time to review it and make sure everything is up to snuff, so to speak. And then the distribution of funding to the venue, they get 50% up front when we award it. And then when they submit the final report that says, you know, how the activities went and how many people attended and all that kind of stuff, then we cut the check for the final 50%. So yeah, that's the general timeline in the way that functions for Mid-America's purposes.
And I know with the KCIC in Kansas, it's 60 days, at least 60 days ahead of the event. But I think, you know, we want to spend these funds. We want to give this money out. So, you know, don't completely eliminate an idea. You can reach out to us at the state arts organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have another question. Sorry, I was trying to reach out. Ariel was asking about California, and so, you know, I'm kind of learning about this, and so I start with West Ave, right, and then I look, okay, where's the California? And so just building this sort of like structure in our own minds of like, how does this funding even get where it's supposed to be going. And that is our next question from Jeff is where are these two organizations, your two organizations, getting their funding? And then we can kind of deduce that might be true for other states and regions.
So, so Mid-America gets its funding primarily, well, we are 501c3, so we do some fundraising on our own. That being said, the National Endowment for the Arts is mandated by Congress to distribute the funding that they get from Congress for their budget. They are mandated to distribute 60% of it out into the field to the state arts agencies and the regional arts organizations. So federal money is going to KCAIC as well as to Mid-America Arts Alliance, differing amounts depending on population and a lot of other factors. There's a formula to it. But every state and every territory in the country gets funding from the federal government if there is a state or state level arts organization that's also contributing to the arts ecosystem, if you will. And so we get some funding from the NEA for our grant programs. We also then work in partnership with KCAIC and our other state arts agency partners. And they contribute a certain amount of money towards our budget as well, so that we can then double that, go back out into their communities 2 to 1 to do other kinds of arts programming. And then, like I said, we do a lot of fundraising on the side. So we've got some programs that are happening specific to Arkansas because the Walton Family Foundation has contributed. We've got some funding that happens specifically in Texas because the Houston Endowment has contributed. Those kinds of things evolve and develop over time. So it's a multifaceted layering of funding that we are working with. This particular grant program is 100% funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. So we are a pass-through agent managing federal money.
Yeah, I think that's a better just layout than I could have come up with. A little beyond my pay grade, but I do know Kansas also has a license plate program, which you can support. I think it's $50 when you register your vehicle. That's one of the other funding sources, but otherwise it's government allocations, and then the matches that Christine mentioned. We do not. KCAC currently does not fundraise outside of those government allocations, to my
really hard for state arts agencies to do fundraising. It really is, because it gets into conflict of interest and a lot of other difficulties. State government.
We've had a couple of questions that relate to the educational side of what an artist might offer for an educational opportunity or workshop programming. And what I thought that I might do, because Nick, you and I are both on the roster, we could maybe talk about that, and then I could also screen share and show what it looks like at the on the website level, what people are looking at when they're looking for a programmer. So do you want to talk about your educational programming?
Yeah, it's been a while, honestly. I've done various kind of programs, and I'll be probably terrified if you're going to pull up the Carswell Hope page, because you'll see some neglect there. I would say, probably if you're going to share something, the children's, the youth would be a good example. But from the work that I've done in the past, Annie
had asked like beyond that, so I'm gonna pick on John Depew because we love John.
Yeah,
let's see what John has. So his primary program description is his, just performance. And then educational activity information. Very simple. How to figure out just about anything. He's very good at figuring things out, so we would trust him to do that. Let me see.
Community activity information is another one. There's a drop down.
Okay, let me pick somebody else too. Oh, let's pick on Sally.
I mean, there is a lot of flexibility in this. It should make sense with your practice. I mean, for example, I'm an Irishman. I do a Songs from Ireland program where I'll talk about Irish music and heritage, and track that from from more traditional, which isn't really my genre, to, we talk a lot about rock and pop and U2 and Van Morrison, and I've created a program around that. Also, just this, I see songwriting workshops here, an artist talk. I mean, that's totally legitimate. I was going to say, through one of Mid America's programs, Artist Inc. Part of that program, you develop a work share, which is usually about a 6 or 7 minute presentation to talk about your work, which I find is a great jumping off point to kind of dig in a little bit more. So it can really be based on you and your body of work, what kind of inspires you. It's up to you to kind of formulate that and brand it as much as you like. So what do you have there?
I've got Annie Wilson's band Tallgrass Express pulled up because I know Annie is thorough and an educator, and so I thought, let's look and
There
see
you
what
go.
Annie has here. And she has an artist talk workshop about what is a regional band, which is really probably a great workshop for her to offer. I mean, her band is called Tallgrass Express, and let's see what her community activity information, mini concert for school classrooms to senior groups. So it doesn't have to be complicated. I think I really overthought my application, and I've only presented like one workshop in the thing that I've got listed here, and everything else has been very just adaptive to whatever the situation is, like whatever the program, wherever the programming is. There's some of my fees, community activity information, educational. So like an open songwriters forum. And then I kind of came up with these 3 different things that we could talk about or do. But it seems like, that aspect of it may or may not be useful for a program director. So I think it's probably best just to work with the programmer and see what their needs are.
And typically, my experience anyway has been that once you have made contact with and are working with a presenter or a venue to present you, they're the ones that will make those connections to the local schools or the community centers or the senior centers.
Right.
It's not like you need to then follow up with figuring out who to talk to at the old folks home in the community. It's the venue will help you navigate those channels.
We have some more questions in the chat, but we also have a hand raised from Vi Tran. Do you want to unmute Vi?
Hi everyone, it's V Tran, Casey Mo. This is my big question. I was actually very fortunate to be the recipient of a KCAIC grant in 2015 to tour my folk musical memoir about my family's escape from Vietnam and resettlement in Garden City, Kansas. And so we received support to tour it to Garden City, to Liberal, Kansas, to Lawrence, Manhattan, a lot of the places that had diasporic refugee folks. Now, at the time, the policy was I couldn't apply because I live a mile east of state line in Kansas City. So in that particular circumstance, there were a lot of exceptions made. We were allowed to apply by one of the ensemble members who lived in Overland Park, and we also were allowed to apply as an artist at large without a presenting nonprofit organization. But because of that experience, that has been a deterrent for me for applying for the touring artist roster, despite the fact that a lot of those communities were like, this was, the impact was amazing, please come back. And I'm like, I can't afford to come back, And so I was wondering if there has been any movement for Kansas City, Missouri residents who are locked into a mortgage in Waldo, but whose affinity is with rural Kansas. Has there been any exemptions or change in policy in that regard?
I can say at our level, I'm afraid not. I mean, this is one of the, again, I can see why this seems silly, right? These state borders are somewhat artificial in how we move around the world in our region and as artists. Unfortunately, it's the funding. It's just the funding comes from the state of Kansas, and that would just, that if your address is in Missouri, that would be money leaving the state of Kansas. I mean, it's not a solution, and I think within the concept is are those limitations they're built in. I mean, I would think Christine and the regional touring program, that would be the time to step in. I don't know, Christine, if that's accurate, but
Yeah, so
yeah.
I think if you were listed on the Missouri Arts Council's touring roster, because they do have one, then the organizations in Garden City could apply through the regional touring program grant to bring you in and do your work there. So that's one way that we try to bridge the gap when there are state regulations that keep it too narrow. We allow for a little bit of a wider lane, if you will, but it still has to be the organization that's applying to the regional touring program grant. I will say we have been rethinking some of that and hoping to potentially open it up to allowing artists to create their own tours and therefore applying for a tour. So we're talking about it. It hasn't quite gotten to the place where that's in place just yet. But that is one way that you could take advantage of the programs that we do have, is finding an organization who will then apply to bring you in. Yeah. I'll also say for the regional touring program grant, you don't necessarily have to be listed on a touring roster in order to get support through the regional touring program grant. The regional touring program grant is open for support. It's meant to support any artist in any discipline. So if you are a literary writer, you don't necessarily apply to be on a touring roster because you might only go on the road when you've got a new publication coming out and you're going to do a book reading or something. And so through the regional touring program grant, organizations, again, have to be the applicant, but they could bring in an artist who is literary focused and is not necessarily listed on a roster, and we will support up to 25% of their fees. So it's not as much as the touring roster artists, that's at 50% of the fees, but we do at least can support it in some fashion.
Thank you. We'll take one more question, recognizing that this is really just a jumping off point for many of us, that we are really just starting to dip our toe in these waters, and hopefully we can continue to support each other by answering questions. And we'll give it an opportunity for Nick and Christine to offer contact information for themselves or for other pertinent people in their areas of expertise that you're looking for extra help with. We'll have one last question from Dave, and that is, how are rates for artist performances established?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit on that. I mean, it's a great question. So this is kind of where we do not actually have a role in that, really. We do not determine that. And this is where I would like, and we're trying to foster more communication amongst the artists themselves, so that there at least is the structure to have that conversation, so people know what is feasible. You know, it is a funny idea, because we want to empower artists to do this. We want to give presenters, and when I say we, I mean KCAIC. We want to give presenters the opportunity to bring artists in, but we don't actually have a role in those negotiations. We are not connecting artists directly, as in making anything like a recommendation beyond the inclusion on the roster. That is our recommendation. So it's really on the artists primarily, and then on that negotiation between the artists and the presenters. And then really the next best thing would be to speak to peers to get that list from Christine. And we're working on having that more accessible, as well as the list of presenters or previous recipients of this grant, the Visiting Artist Grant or the Regional Touring Program Grant. So you know where to start, where you could find who has used the grant and have those conversations. But it speaks to a bigger challenge around how we value our art. And I think our best recommendation is that it really depends. It's up to each individual artist to determine what your fees might be, what your success could look like, what kind of program you want to put in place. We do require educational or outreach, but we don't stipulate what that needs to be. That's where we're empowering artists to define that for themselves. So unfortunately, there's no one good answer. I would say, more research around your market, where you are, where you want to play, the types of venues you want to play. And then, this is always just a good idea, is to look at artists who are doing the kind of work that you want to do and reach out to them. And that's where we feel, in supporting the program throughout the year, ideally, if we could build that cohort where we're facilitating that conversation, that is the role that we can have at KCAIC. But it would be nice if we just had a standard rate, wouldn't it? I mean, it would make it a lot easier, but unfortunately, that's just kind of beyond the scope as we view the project or the program.
Yeah, and it kind of puts me on a tangent to at least mention Local 1000. If you don't know about Local 1000, they do offer kind of a minimum wage rates for different areas and different roles that you're playing. So might be interesting to look into that. I often refer to that when I get lowballed and say, well, anyway, that is a big and different conversation. Christine, can you please tell us how we can get a hold of you and Mid-America Arts Alliance?
Absolutely. So in the name of underneath my picture, I have rtp@ma.org. That's the email address specifically for the Regional Touring Program grant. But you can also reach me at Christine, CHRISTINE, @ma.org. That's me directly, and I can hook you up with all of the other divisions if you've got somebody who does exhibitions, or if you're interested in artist services programs, Artist Inc. in particular, that has already been mentioned. If there are other things that I can help connect the dots for, that's what I'm here for. So please reach out and let me know.
Not to put you on the spot, but here's a public invitation for Ma to have a presence at Farm. We would love to invite you, and we will do the work of inviting Arts Midwest and all the other organizations that are doing work in our Farm region to come and have a presence there, because I think that can only make our conference better. So, Nick, how can we get a hold of you?
Yeah, I just put my email in the chat, and then the link that I added, which is on the KCAIC website. We also have field representatives for the various regions in our state. I don't have a geographic region. I'm looking at creative industries generally, and music ecosystems as well. So I'm available, and that's my email. But if our field reps have great kind of knowledge, most, if not all of them, are artists as well. And they're contracted by KCAIC to be consultants to answer questions, especially around grant time. And I will say, just back to the, you don't actually have to be on our state roster to get that visiting artist grant as well, but you're eligible for more for a higher fee or a higher grant. Or like Christine, I think it was a little bit higher percentage of those artist fees that you'll cover if you are on the roster. So you're incentivized to join your roster, and we have, hopefully, if there's one thing you'll take away from today, is that we do encourage you to seek out and investigate joining your artist roster. But that doesn't mean you can't make use of these grants. And yeah, some of them are rolling, some of them are till the funds are spent. I know for example, Kansas touring roster artists, those are rolling on a rolling basis 60 days prior to the event. But if you're not on the roster, then you're tied to our annual grant application. So, like any grant, you have to get in there and start paying attention to the details, understanding the timelines, understanding how eligibility works. But, again, for us, it's all about empowering artists to get those gigs and presenters to make use of the funds to bring those artists.
Great. Thank you very much to both of you for being here and volunteering your time to come and talk to us and help us to understand this a little bit better. On behalf of Folk Alliance Region Midwest, I would like to say thank you so much for joining our Tech Tuesday. Big thanks, huge thanks to Annie Capps, hiding behind the scenes, who makes everything click and go the way that it's supposed to be. We love you, Annie. Yes, we do. We have a performance lane sign up this week, I believe. So please be on our mailing list. Make sure that you're paying attention to that, because that deadline comes and goes like that. Sign up happens so fast. So if you want to be in our performance lane this month, be sure that you're watching your email. Also, as I said before, our conference registration is open. We would love to see you all in Lisle, Illinois in October. So please make plans to go ahead and be with us then. We have another virtual connections meeting next week. It's our folk DJ peer session next Wednesday. And that's probably all I'm going to throw at you. We're very busy here at Farm, so make sure that you're staying in touch with us on the email and the socials. And we will say adios to you on the live stream. Thank you all so